Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking some truly fascinating insights from ancient texts like the Bhagavad Gita and the Ramayana. We're going to look at exactly how to take a restless, completely chaotic mind and transform it into a disciplined, purposeful powerhouse. If you've ever felt totally overwhelmed by your own thoughts, well, you are absolutely in the right place.
Let's kick things off with a question I know we've all wrestled with when dealing with distraction, overthinking, or anxiety. Why does our own mind often feel so incredibly impossible to tame? Why does it feel like we are constantly fighting ourselves just to sit down and focus?
To figure that out, we're going to cover 5 key things today. 1. The thousand-hooded mind. 2. Lakshmana, the mind with purpose. 3. Looking inward versus outward. 4. A really powerful directed car analogy. And 5. Deciding if your mind is your best friend or your worst enemy. All right, let's jump right into part 1, the thousand-hooded mind, or the chaos of Sheshnag. So picture your untrained natural mind as Sheshnag. In ancient texts, this is an infinite mythological serpent with literally thousands of hoods. Just sit with that imagery for a second. Every single one of those thousands of hoods represents the overwhelming multitude of our daily thoughts, our spontaneous desires, sudden fears, impulses, and anger. It's a perfect visualization of just how powerful, multidirectional, and vast our restless consciousness really is. Now, when all of those thousands of hoods face the wrong way, meaning they point outward toward the illusion of the external world, your mind gets hijacked by 2 specific states, rajas and tamas. Rajas is basically endless, directionless action and deep desire. And tamas, that brings in the heavy stuff, negative energy, fear, enmity, and sometimes just total, paralyzed inactivity. When your mind is constantly pointed outward at everything happening around you, you're basically operating in a state of constant reaction. You're filled with frantic energy, but you have zero real direction.
And ancient wisdom totally nailed this struggle. The Bhagavad Gita, specifically chapter 6, verse 34 says, "The mind is restless, turbulent, strong, and stubborn, so controlling it is very difficult like controlling wind." That perfectly captures why an uncontrolled, outward-facing mind is as fiercely stubborn to contain as a violent windstorm. You can't just grab the wind with your bare hands, right? That is exactly what fighting a restless mind feels like.
Moving right along to section 2, Lakshmana, the mind with purpose. This is how we go from chaos to discipline.
In the epic Ramayana, this wild, chaotic serpent actually incarnates as the character Lakshmana. And the breakdown of this name is absolutely fascinating. The name Lakshmana literally translates to a combination of 2 words, Laksh, which means an aim or a goal, and Man, which means the mind. Put them together and you get a mind that has been given a precise aim. When the mind has a clear target, it transforms from chaotic energy into a highly disciplined tool that can assist the higher self or absolute truth. The contrast here is just night and day. An aimless mind is pure, directionless action. It doesn't plan. It just reacts constantly to the outer world, filling up with negativity and exhaustion. But a purposeful mind, that Lakshmana mind, is a whole different ballgame. Because it has a goal, it becomes sharp, immensely focused, and deeply disciplined. It aligns perfectly with duty, or dharma. It's basically the difference between flailing around frantically in the water and swimming with precision straight toward the shore.
Which brings us to part 3, looking inward versus outward. We're talking Vishanand and Atmanand.
So how do we actually make that shift? How does the mind go from restless to purposeful? Well, first we have to realize our default setting naturally operates in a state called Vishanand. This means the mind is constantly wandering outward, desperately chasing temporary pleasure through the external senses, the Vishayas, like touch, hearing, and taste. If you're constantly scrolling on your phone just hunting for that next visual or auditory dopamine hit, your mind is stuck in Vishanand. You're looking outside for a temporary sense of joy, which is exactly why the mind stays so agitated.
The exact opposite of that state is Atmanand. Chapter 6, verse 26 of the Gita actually advises that whenever the mind naturally wanders off into those shiny external distractions, we have to consciously pull it back inward to Atmanand. That means finding your joy and your stability internally. You direct the mind toward the self, or pure consciousness. You have to stop relying on the chaotic outside world to dictate how you feel and instead find your anchor inside. So here's the crucial takeaway. True mental rest only ever happens when our thousands of thoughts turn away from all that external chaos and focus internally on pure consciousness, which is associated with a state of truth called sattva. In the mythology, this is visually represented by that thousand-hooded serpent, Sheshnag, facing inward toward Lord Vishnu,
who represents pure consciousness. When the mind finally looks in, it finally finds peace. All right, Section 4, the directed car analogy. Let's modernize this ancient wisdom.
To make this super practical for our daily lives, think of your mind like an incredibly powerful sports car. If it's in step 1, completely uncontrolled, with no direction, operating on pure speed and negative impulses, you are without a doubt going to crash. It's just an accident waiting to happen. But move to step 2, a directed mind, and you give that car a purpose. Now you can safely navigate the roads and actually reach your destination. And finally, step 3. This is where the mind is surrendered and perfectly aligned with your higher intelligence. At this point, the car basically drives itself. The ride becomes effortlessly smooth, protected, and incredibly divine.
Finally, we arrive at Section 5, your best friend or enemy. This is the ultimate choice.
Listen to this quote from chapter 6, verse 6 of the Gita, because it makes the stakes perfectly clear. It says, "For one who has conquered the mind is the best friend. But for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy." There is literally no neutral ground when it comes to your consciousness. Your mind is either actively working for you, protecting you, and guiding you toward truth, or it is actively working against you, dragging you right back into the chaos.
To really hammer this idea home, let's look at two iconic figures from the epic battlefield of the Mahabharata. On one hand, you have Krishna. He represents the positive, conquered mind. This is a mind rooted in intelligence, in that inner truth or sattva we talked about earlier. He acts as the ultimate best friend. On the flip side, there's Shakuni. He perfectly embodies the unconquered, negative mind. This mind is entirely obsessed with endless action, outward hatred, and negativity, making it your absolute worst enemy. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with something to really chew on today. Go back to that car analogy for a second. Who is actually steering the vehicle of your mind right now? Are you looking inward, finding that directed purpose, and driving toward the intelligent peace of Krishna? Or are those thousands of restless hoods looking outward, dragging you aimlessly toward the chaotic negativity of Shakuni? The ultimate choice of where to point your focus, well, that's entirely yours.